Jade, imagine you were part of the 77th Battalion and you were trekking through the Argonne Forest to get to the German defenses, thinking the French are on your flanks when in reality, they aren't. Well, this is the story about the Lost Battalion and the Battle of Argonne Forest in World War I in 1918. Well, the 3 points I will come in with you about this is that Major Whittlesey did an amazing job with being able to keep his men alive for as long as he did, and he was able to do a lot of things. This was the first battle that really broke us through till the end of World War I. The war ended about a few weeks to a few months or so after the Battle of the Argonne Forest. It was considered the battle that changed everything. And I will also be talking about what are considered acceptable losses and what does that mean and why is that important. Well, so the first thing that happened was when Major Whittlesey was sent and by the colonel, his troops had just returned. The 77th Battalion had just returned back to base and they had barely gotten any time to recoup. At this time during World War I, lice and rats and everything were a very big problem in the trenches. So normally the men, after they would get back from a battle, the men who would survive would go into town and they would get good showers. They would make sure that the lice would come out of their clothing, out of their hair, out of everything, and then they would get sent back to battle. Well, Major Whittlesey's men went in and they went in very unprepared and very ill-prepared. Well, he went in with about, sources are unclear, some say over 500, some say over 600, some say over 700 men in his battalion into the Argonne Forest. They were sent by a colonel, and that colonel is who is a little bit important to this story and also very important to the future of people who are in the military to this day. So once Major Whittlesey was able to get the Lost Battalion or the 77th Battalion, into the Argonne Forest, they were very quickly surrounded by the Germans. They thought that the French were on their flanks. They ended up not being able to get there. Therefore, the French pulled back. And when the French pulled back, then that left all the men that we had in the Argonne Forest alone. Like I said, might have been over 700 men that went in, and less than 100, some say 190. I've been able to read on different sources via museums that it's 194 exactly, but we are very unsure about this, especially because technology was not great at the time during World War I. I mean, it's 1918. Therefore, our records are not completely accurate, especially with how many men we were losing during World War I. Normally, death tolls talk around. They don't say exactly this until recent years. But the German soldiers were completely surrounding them, and Major Whittlesey was able to hold them off until October 8th. So they were able to be in there for about 8 days, 7 days, and they were able to survive for that long. They were having to raid the Germans' bodies for food and ammunition because they were completely taken out. At some point, the Americans' side started bombing that specific area, and the soldiers had to send a carrier pigeon, and their last carrier pigeon at that, back, saying, "Please stop, you're bombing us." And they immediately were like, oh, that's where they are. They sent a plane to be able to go and talk or see where they were. The Germans did shoot down that plane. However, that's how we kind of knew where they were. So we were able to send a bunch more men into that area and get them out of there, the 77th Battalion. Now, the colonel came in talking about what are acceptable losses. And he said that it was an acceptable loss for the amount of men that happened to lose their lives when the 77th Battalion went into the Argonne Forest. And Major Whittlesey definitely did not feel that that was fair. He very respectfully spoke up about this towards the colonel and was like, I don't think that any of these men think that these losses were acceptable. And the colonel tried to just promote all of them and make it just a thing about whether or not it was okay to lose that life. Well, now we do not allow that in our military. It is now required that colonels are looked at to make sure that their stuff is checking out and their decisions are checking out so that people do not lose their life unnecessarily based on just things that are happening